Genji is one of the most popular and game-defining heroes in all of Overwatch, which is why Blizzard has naturally tried to nerf him out of the game, and have used him as a whipping boy to solve any balance problem. If anything is OP, nerf Genji. In the launch of Overwatch 2, with the original DPS passive, he was definitely an S-tier character, getting a movement speed bonus after an elimination stacked on his playstyle as it was, making him one of the biggest beneficiaries of that old passive. And keep in mind you get a move speed buff with Dragonblade as well, which made this doubly impressive, so much so that they're fairly quick to both nerf Genji and remove the DPS passive. The state of the game is much different now though, where most of the value is in the support line and they probably have the best passive, so much so that a lot of balance experts seem to agree that we could probably remove the support passive and the support role would still be fine. Conversely, after looking at this old footage, I think we could give the old DPS passive back too. Either would be great. Until then though, the DPS category is more so going to look to be more supportive, oddly enough, or counter pick oriented. I think most players know that DPS picks are good at countering the enemy tank, but what's less known, I think, is how Genji is a crucial component as a brawler character to enable your tank. That's right, 7 years into the game and Genji has reached his final form as a tank, which is the main lesson that we can learn from China's team comp that nearly won the entire World Cup, one map away from canceling the reverse sweep, and we might be having a different conversation about the heroes involved in their playstyle. But even though they didn't win it all, they certainly rampaged throughout the bracket, making key use of an aspect that only really Genji can provide in the damage category, giving your team a sustain or durability cooldown that can counteract a lot of the big offense that otherwise could dominate your tank. If you're an Overwatch 1 fan, this won't come as a huge surprise to you because weaving in front of your main tank was a playstyle we used to have called the off tank, but in a 5v5 landscape that's taken on a little bit of a different form. A lot of the strongest tanks in the game don't have big defenses for themselves or the team, but have great offense. So Genji, a character that can keep up with their aggressive positioning, and a cooldown that can counter some of the biggest disable abilities in the game, as well as some ultimates, you can make a lot of space for your team brawling, while still having the flexibility to flank as well, and big play potential in the ult fight when you get everything to work. Even in the new landscape with a completely different balance philosophy, not even Blizzard can keep Genji down, looking still relevant into the future. We'll have a lot more to break down right after this quick message. Today's video sponsor is Surfshark VPN. There's a reason why everyone I know who's tech savvy uses a VPN, myself included. Whether it's big companies or cyber criminals, everyone wants to get after your data, and what a VPN does is protect it. Surfshark VPN keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all of the information sent between your device and the internet. And on top of that, the virtual private network will change your IP address's location, which allows you to travel the world virtually. Surfshark has 3,200 servers in 100 countries, which will allow you to unblock content libraries on streaming services in other countries like Netflix. Especially if you're traveling a lot, which I do, I use Surfshark VPN to get access to the content I was paying for anyway. This cracks the code on the region gating they try to do. A lot of good features. This one next is the top for me. The VPN will secure your online data, which matters the most on public Wi-Fi. Surfshark's clean web feature blocks ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, allowing you to surf the web safely. Masking your IP address is essential to becoming private online. A VPN makes sure that your city, country, and download history aren't linked to your identity. And true to the mission, Surfshark does not track or monitor your online activity. If you use the internet, you need a VPN. So that means you. Protect yourself now by using our promo code YOUROverwatch at checkout and get up to 6 additional months for free thanks to their Black Friday deal going on right now. Surfshark has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so what's there to lose? Just click the link in the description and try it out for yourself. Now, Genji's got a variety of playstyles we'll cover in today's video, but the first one that's most applicable is using Genji to counter the counters to your strongest teammate, and that's your tank. There's a lot of tanks in the game, and they seem to keep adding more that barely have any defense and have insane offense. Doom, Junker Queen, Roadhog with the rework, and Mauga coming out in Season 8 are vulnerable not just to anti-nade, but pressure damage in general, considering just how effective a lot of the medium-range characters are in the game, and I don't just mean the damage hit scans, but also characters like Alari and Batiste who have strong healing and headshot damage into your tank. So this means the primary way that you can make space for the team is holding your reflect for when your tank is pushing, starting to get low, and then extend their life to guarantee they live and can hold their positions longer, especially when the enemy lacks ability to manipulate the front line in such a way. You'll notice you'll be able to pressure out the enemy and gain more space against them. This would be thinking of Genji's reflect similar to something like a Mei Wall, or even maybe a Sombra hack. Yet another flex DPS style ability that's aiming to help out your tank be more effective. I think it's especially clear when you compare to the team fights and the way they looked from that Season 1 gameplay I showed earlier to this gameplay now. There's far more escapes and survivability, healing and repositioning. The team fights in general last longer. So Overwatch in general at the end of 2023 and into 2024 is more about sculpting the team fight carefully, working out cooldowns, looking for weaknesses, and gaining a positional advantage until you can capitalize. To that extent, Genji does that great, and is quite unique with how durable he potentially can be in the fight, thanks to his movement evasiveness and the potential of reflect. To maximize this Brawl playstyle, a key window I try to look for is when my tank is starting to take a bit of damage to the point where the enemy might call them out as a focus fire target, but rather than them have to back out of position for me to step in and reflect that big burst of oncoming damage back at the enemy, possibly even reflecting cooldowns back as well. In this way, Genji feels almost more like a defender, because while you are going aggressive, the goal is to defend against the offense that's normally supposed to punish it. So walking in, challenging space, and reflecting back the Cass or Ananade, or other high value ones like Grav or Alariel. Another key one to keep in mind is that Reflect has the same cooldown as Bastion's Transform. While Transform will outlast Reflect, typically it's enough time for your team to reposition before Bastion really farms them. While I think Doomfist, Junker Queen, and Roadhog will benefit the most from Genji defending them from their counters, I've noticed that this works well with just about any tank, especially the traditional main tanks that actually don't have enough offense, at least not by themselves. Overall, the defensive cooldowns are too strong in the game right now. It can feel like there's always more escapes for the enemy to use, and when your damage isn't bursty enough, it can feel hard to finish targets. That's where the flanking mobility of Genji comes into effect. You're not going to expect to just run at the enemy and clean them up easily like you would have in Season 1, but what you will be able to do is gain positional advantage, work down their resources over time, punish things that are out of position, or once they are lacking their critical cooldown, and then clean up everything easily. Losing that DPS passive from back of the day means that you don't gain as much of an advantage at the first pick, because it used to be get a kill, become a superhero. Now you get a kill and reload faster. Doesn't do much. Might as well not have a passive. So because of that, there's still a lot more to play for. So while we'll show some pop-off clips later in the video as well, I think it's also important to show just how slow and methodical you can play with this and still have a big benefit to your playstyle. I think your first step should be to gain a position where you can punish the enemy and then shoot at the tank until another target reveals itself. And again, the reason why we're doing that is because supports are better duelists than DPS, so why go at them? That's just a silly thing to do. Instead, we're going to hold formation, punish when they're out of position, but not necessarily look to go force anything. With this playstyle, we're looking to drain out the enemy resources and not expect to gain kills until they're out. In Season 1, you felt like you could be a mechanical powerhouse and bully over the enemy. Now the strategy component is much more intense in the game. To cap off this off-tank brawler section, I want to give some key tips on what to look out for to enable your tank. It'll help you to learn which tanks are vulnerable to what. Shieldless tanks, especially the lifesteal ones, are most vulnerable to anti-nade, but also there's a lot of shieldless tanks that are really vulnerable to hit scan headshots. Queen especially, or Zarya when she doesn't have her bubbles. The old Overwatch 1 style tanks, like Reinhardt, Winston, or even Diva, don't have the insane damage that the new Overwatch 2 style tanks have. So because of that, going aggressive and focus firing with them is even more important, as opposed to, let's say, protecting your Doomfist until he gets his abilities going. He can get kills on his own. So to be a good brawler teammate, it's to supplement whatever weakness our tank is going to have, generally aided by good focus fire or marking out their counters. For the next section now, maybe is the more fun variety of Genji, when he still gets to be the old duelist you remember him as. There's a lot of reasons why this is harder and less applicable less often, mainly because the freedom of movement that a lot of the characters have, it seems like every support comes out with an escape and a defensive cooldown. You're not going to expect this to work all the time, but let's talk about how to go aggressive at the backline and when and why you should do it. Something that's very important to know about Genji's effectiveness is burst damage is going to be highly reliant on your ability to set up his ult fire. You shoot 3 shurikens out at once. The best case scenario is if you're in kissing distance on the enemy. Somewhat of a forgiving hitbox as a projectile. Jamming this into the head of a sniper class character can get you a quick burst kill, especially with the damage from Swift Strike, which you likely use to close the distance anyway. Distance control is the name of the game, and with how big the maps are and how mobile everything is, it's actually unlikely that you're often going to feel like you're going to be able to set up that key money shot to make your character look dominant. But your mastery of Swift Strike will help you out. Keep in mind it has 15 meters of range, but you can stop it short if you aim it at the ground. But if you can't get an extreme close range, you can still get a decent amount of burst damage at like a 5 to 8 meter range, depending on the enemy's hitbox size, if you learn to offset the aim of your alternate fire. Yes, I am saying deliberately miss a little bit, because the ult fire goes out with 3 shurikens. One is at the center, but there's a bit of a magical range where the middle one and the side one can both hit due to the size of the projectile if you kind of aim a little bit off. This will really help your burst damage at that somewhat medium close range if you can manage to land 2 shurikens where otherwise it may have only been 1. Now that's the way Genji will deal burst damage, enough to be able to secure kills, but there's 2 reasons why you would want to use his primary fire, and that is when you're poking at range, which is most of your gameplay anyway, as you're looking to jockey for position to get in closer, or if the target's hitbox is outside of the effective range of your ult fire. You can really begin to test your limits with this, depending on how many headshots you can hit. There's a lot of targets in the game right now which are better duelists than you, so you won't expect to beat a BAP, Kiri, or a Lari until their cooldowns are out. But you have a better chance against slower characters like Ana, Ashe, Widow, or even look out for very defensive characters like Lifeweaver. While he has counterplay against you, he also doesn't do much if you're able to get right on top of him. He's very tanky, but doesn't really fight back either. At this playstyle, Genji is benefiting a bit as well for other characters to not be as good at this similar job. Other characters that like to barrel stuff, shotgun damage, like Reaper or Tracer, can feel far more limited on where they're allowed to play. And for my money, don't do enough in the long cooldown exchanges that is the modern era of power creep Overwatch 2. And while others might be more reliable, Genji has bigger spikes of impact, which tend to fit a lot of situations better in my opinion. Another idea for you is another typical problem you might encounter as a damage player, and that is a low resource style comp. Typically characters that are self-sufficient in their own right, but aren't going to give you much to work with. That can feel limiting as a damage player, and maybe in an ideal scenario, you would like to be getting nano boost, which we'll talk about later, but Genji can actually work with a full flank style. Look to do this when you have a combination of dive plus low healing numbers. Lucio, Kiri, maybe even Brig in there. In this instance, we'll look to hold space a lot less and skirmish more. Maps that have high ground with walls you can climb are best for this, as our goal will be to kind of just get in and out almost undetected. Zippy max mobility style team comps like this gain sustained from using cover as they swarm around the enemy, and no one from the team is really peeking long enough to make them a viable target. And whereas a character like Echo will be more offensive for this kind of play, Genji has a better ultimate and more defense, and on the right map, potentially more mobility, particularly ones with good walls for him to climb. The key to making this work is remembering the difference of the type of supports you have on your team. Characters like Ana or BAP love it when their team is aggressive forward, taking heat off of them, giving them resources. Lucio and Brig are competent fighters in their own right, so that means you actually have to hang back a little bit and treat them more like a DPS teammate as opposed to a support. And that goes for any support player you get on your team that seems to be more damage-minded than heal-minded. DPS, BAP, and Alari players are common as well, and goes the same way. But remember, that doesn't have to be a bad thing for you, because your goal is to use Swift Strike on targets that are low. Perhaps the most fun section, let's talk about Dragonblade. Similar in theme to this video proclaiming the benefits of a defensive Genji, probably the biggest Dragonblade tip is for you to lower your expectations of what you should get out of Dragonblade. In most cases, I'd much rather get a solo blade kill and survive than try to go for more and die, but it will depend on the resources in play. The function of Genji we've talked about today isn't necessarily about your damage. That's one of the things you do. His ability as a teammate is a bit ahead of that. So dying to overextend with Blade is bad, because as long as you survive with your team, you'll get your Swift Strike cooldowns anyway, and you'll be able to clean the fight up. Genji's naturally good at that, but the way you'll get your biggest bang for your buck with Dragonblade is when a combination of things happen, where the enemy use a lot of cooldowns already, either on your tank or perhaps shooting into you, hopefully reflecting it back, and when you get nano. well. Because remember, Dragonblade's damage was nerfed to 110, so there are things that can out-heal it or out-tank it. It was balanced that way due to how strong it potentially can be with damage amps from Mercy Beam or from Nano Boost. So whether you have those or not are going to dramatically change what you're going to be able to take down. Especially when you don't have resources, I find it's much better to secure that one key kill and hold positioning, thinking of Dragonblade as an opportunity to extend your mobility cooldowns, or even in some cases, safely hack down the tank. That's just the nature of how the game's been rebalanced due to balance patches, but also hero additions. Blink and you miss it, Overwatch 2 from year 1 to 2 has far more crowd control, disables, and defensive cooldowns, which makes it harder to use Dragonblade. But if you either drain them out, have good combos with your teammates, and use your mobility well to avoid some of your biggest threats, Dragonblade can look like one of the best ults in the game again. Last section of the video, I want to talk about some potential counter swaps to consider, why you would want to swap off Genji. First one's a bit obvious, I think. If a Winston really wants to over-dedicate just for you, you might want to go to Bastion or Reaper just to kill him. But in general, I don't think any tank is particularly too strong against Genji because of his mobility. You should always be able to distance control against them anyway, but that does mean you have to outplay the stuns of Sigma or Doomfist. In this game in particular, I quickly realized a downfall of Genji. Ashe Pharah is effectively like double sniper, Lucio's great on well, and Doomfist running down main meant my team never could really get in. In the same way that we think about Genji marking certain threats to make space for the team, Sombra can do that as well, as a better matchup against Pharah, and can kind of emulate the flanking playstyle we're going for. And that's the nature of the damage roll as we've discussed. You're either helping your tank in, countering their tank, or the last option I'll say is ranged hit scan. Still very good in the damage roll. It's a whole lot easier when you have a ranged character applying pressure. While Genji adds interactions, his poke isn't as reliable, so it'll be harder for him to put up raw stats over time. I think Soldier and Sojourn are some of the better options right now, but if you're good at them, you can play Ashe or Widow, and Cassidy's Magnade is kind of nuts, and will add to that CC stacking if that's what your team comp is going for. Guys, that's everything for today's video. I've been enjoying Genji in the new power creep era of the game. It's a kind of playstyle that's more up my alley, I think. More careful and cerebral. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And to support the channel, you can check out today's video sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Click the link in the description. And don't forget to like the video and hit subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our new videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.